Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Let us delve into the discussion of the night. Today is marked as a special day for Kenyans as the country gained independence from the British after being under rule of the sovereign state since the late 19th century. The holiday formally marks the date of the country's admittance in 1964 into the Commonwealth as a republic. Now, December 12th is also the date when Kenya obtained its independence from the Great Britain in 1963. 59 years down the line, has Kenya fully gained its full independence amidst the speculations of state capture from fellow Africans? That forms our basis tonight of our discussion, and joining me is Kennedy Sankara, who is a seasoned political analyst. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Orina.
Make your statement.
First, I'm happy for being here today. It's been quite some time, but we are here, and courtesy of the National Youth Senate or the Youth Senate Kenya, I am the Youth Senator Kisumu County. I'm also a mentor. I've mentored young people like myself of my age in various capacities. If you go to like Kipe, you find Mushiri, who is the student leader there. That's my political student. Alvin of Kiongozi Kenya, those are my political students, and they are mentoring also young people. So straight to our today's topic, the state capture, and it's a coincidence that we're actually celebrating Jamhuri Day. But again, as young people, most of us are not equipped with information. By the way, when I sit here, I do a lot of research on what transpires within my country. I watch several documentaries from Al Jazeera to Jichopevu, even to case files. A lot of things that happen now that the dark has come since 6 p.m. To me, I would say, based on the information at my disposal, that in as much as we are independent, we are not yet freely independent as a country. A lot of institutions have been captured, and by that, let me define state capture. State capture is the repurposing of legal processes and institutions to continue reproducing results that favor a clique of individuals, powerful, rich operatives at the expense of the ordinary mwananchi. In 1963, or since Kenya was colonized from 1920 to when we sought our self-independence, a lot of people who sacrificed passionately and patriotically for the cause of independence, majority never enjoyed the fruits of freedom. People were maimed, people were tortured, people were killed, women were raped to conceal or in the process of concealing information against the Mau Mau fighters when the white colonialists or soldiers demanded to know where their hideouts were. These are people who never lived to enjoy the fruits of freedom because of state operatives. And by the way, Kenya is where it is today because of a simple mistake that happened during independence. When the white men left, they left a country in the hands of black people to take over. The people who the government, the first government worked with, were the colonial home guards and the chiefs. These are people who knew nothing about human rights protection and justice. All they were brought up seeing is torture, oppression, murder of black people. Look at the mass murder in Hola that sparked even the British Parliament, that led to the resignation of one of the colonialist soldiers who were in Kenya. So a lot of these things, look at our prisons today. These are never correctional facilities. They are an inheritance of concentration camps, and what is done there is basic human rights infringement. And I'm just saying all this to paint a picture of the independence we are celebrating today. We just copy-pasted, lifted directly from what the white man left into a black perspective. There is no much big difference. So by mentioning state capture, and here I am a young person, the majority of victims of state capture are young people. When you lack inclusion of young people in various government institutions or structures of governance, that is state capture. When medicine is released by the national government and it ends up in the pockets of individuals, as opposed to public health facilities. That is state capture. When education, the exams are being released, or people get information prior to what is released to the general students to sit, others get upper hand information, and still, that is state capture. It is favoring a section of a few individuals at the expense of the majority. I mean, and when you're told to maybe look at state capture, and signs of state captures are very clear. The law enforcement is usually partisan, and in the hands of, or in the pockets and hands of politicians. They are manipulated, and that's why when the leaders act blinded for the corruption in the police service, it automatically justifies that indeed state capture is beneficial to a few. That corruption they are fearing to speak about or intentionally avoiding is their favor. I mean, it favors them. It is their source of income.
Sankara, if I could interlude you there at that point, you've mentioned about the government favoring a few people, like the corrupt personnel in the government. Are we looking at selective justice, where now the judiciary seems to be going soft on individuals who are allied to the current government?
Orina, when I was actually giving you this description, I was trying to create an environment where state capture thrives. And just as I said, law enforcement is partisan in the pockets of politicians. Civic space is affiliated, and you find free elections are bungled, and the most violent and the most corrupt emerge the victorious. The electoral bodies are manipulated and twisted to favor a section of individuals in the political race. When the judiciary, fighting corruption or lack of efficient fight on corruption in Kenya is a justification of state capture. When we have the law enforcement, which has been weakened, and there's the courts or the judicial wheels are actually ungreased, they are moving so slow. Fighting corruption requires effective and active police service. It also requires an independent, accountable, and professional judiciary. It also requires a professional Office of Director of the Public Prosecutions, and that is where we draw the line. In the recent past, we saw the DPP withdraw various cases where huge sums of public funds had been siphoned under unclear circumstances. That is a clear justification of state capture.
But then, Sankara, these government officials go around talking about what they are doing to tackle this issue of corruption. If state capture indeed benefits the elite, then why are they going around to fight the same vice?
Why do you feel or find out that emblematic corruption cases are never solved to the finality in this country? Resolving these corruption cases is actually putting to an end that systematic bargaining of political power by the elites. These are a group of people who know each other. The cases are there, the evidences. It is a wide range of interference, from the arrest. Arresting someone and taking them to a police station do not justify the intention of prosecuting the case to finality. Those are two different things. Either way, the state capture operatives do so to keep it live in the public domain that an active case pursuing a corruption scandal is actually ongoing. Another thing is to show the international world that indeed Kenya abhors corruption. But in real sense, these things never go settled. Look at the case of the MP, Honorable Waluke. By Waluke standing before the president and saying, Mr. President, my colleagues had cases and they were dropped, and even mine nishughulikie. That is impunity of the highest order. Real-time state capture. The president is not a judge in either of our court system. He is merely a president. The government has got three arms: the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. The moment the judiciary is gonna act as a subservient arm of the executive, then you find or you get to know what actually state capture is. So a lot of things, these corruption cases, they have more than meets the eye. They are never settled. Mm-hmm. And if I go back to history, when former President Moi Kibaki got to office in 2002, the economic journalist and advisor to the president, Mr. Gidonjo, he had a serious issue to do with Anglo leasing and the Eurobond scandal. Mm-hmm. He found it tough to an extent. He had to go to exile because he was touching on a very powerful clique of individuals, people who had the state of machinery at their disposal. We have seen people who have been shot in the roads with clear CCTV footages, and no one has been arrested and prosecuted. High-profile murders. That is a clear justification that state capture is not a theory, but an existent.
But then the president today, during his speech, was speaking about, relieving a lot of these security forces from infiltrating the government offices, claiming that somehow the previous government had people maybe assassinated for that purpose. Do you think we are actually having these, our nation liberated of state capture?
State capture is here to stay, because let me tell you, enablers of state capture, even in the successive regimes, there are people working in the current regime that they were former employees of the previous regimes. They were at the helm of power and positions of influence to effectively implement the constitutional expectations of their offices. What we saw was actually the opposite. So a majority of them, it has been transitional, and that's why when I say most of these cases cannot be resolved, because putting or resolving them is to undo the implicit transactional political bargaining power. And most of the state capture objective is not actually to loot. Mm-hmm. Looting is part of state capture, the repurposing of legal processes and institutions to favor a few, but it goes beyond looting. It is not a merely looting vehicle. It is repurposed to, ground more political power and influence for long-term sustainability. When you find the judiciary being enticed by the executive and parliament being enticed by the executive through FT and non-existent allowances, then you must be ready to listen to the bells of state capture. Those are signs and symptoms of state capture, a disease that is very difficult to treat. But as I usually tell the young people who are the victims of state capture, never be carried away by stereotypic politicians and forget about what it calls to be a patriotic citizen.
Do you think that's even possible in the first place? Because we see during the campaigns a clear image of what, the young people actually go for.
Well, it is possible. By the way, Orena, let me tell you, as I'm seated here, I was actively involved in this presidential election. I was a youth leader at the ANC party. Even the president knows me in person. I worked with the Prime CS as his youth leader, but that did not put me or sustain me to stay with them to the last minute. My consciousness dictated that I had to leave the camp, and I'm just trying to respond to you that it is very possible. Not everyone is actually aligned towards that side. Young people, there are still young people out here who are guarded by, who have got integrity, guarded by character. Actually, the fight for freedom is always left for the people with integrity and guarded character. This Jamhuri Day we are celebrating today, it was not as a product. It was not a product of a mere biscuit transfer from one room or one plate to the other. People went through serious challenges to get us to where we are today. There is nothing that comes on a silvery platter. You have to put yourself out there, and it is the responsibility of the youths to put to account this current regime while engaging the same regime in a reasonable perspective. It's not a matter of putting to account. I mean, putting to account is not even opposing the government. It is trying to ensure that the right thing is done by the right person, but you can still meaningfully engage the government. I, as the Sankara, I will work with the Office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary on youth-related matters. That will not stop me from coming here and calling out the ills of the current regime, bold and plainly the way they are.
Speaking of ill, Sankara, if I could just interrupt you for a moment, we didn't see the president today talk about the dismissal of the graft cases amounting to over 160 billion shillings from over the years, but instead he spoke about digitizing government services. Do you think this is going to come in handy in tackling the issue of, money ending up in people's pockets?
Well, actually today's event was very interesting to me. First, when I heard that every person who was to go to Nyayo was to live as a student of Arizona University. Hustlers today graduated. They graduated with degrees in promises and lies from in promises and hopes from the Department of Lies and Faculty of DSET. Where on earth? Digitization is a process. We've had Ajira Digital and etc. I am someone who has been actively involved in youth matters. These things are not dreams, they are structured. And it's not really going to work. To pronounce and to do, those are two different things. We have policy formulation and policy implementation. That is where a thick line is usually drawn in Kenya's perspective. Even the tree planting issue. We have no problem with planting 1.5 billion trees, but why are we planting them? Because of deforestation. You cannot address a challenge without addressing the actual cause of the challenge. When there is scramble for firewood, that automatically depicts the lifestyle of the people of Kenya. They are still living an hand-to-mouth economy. These are people who cannot afford even a cooking gas or an alternative kerosene, which is also not safe for environmental conservation. You are not lowering the cost of cooking gas, and instead you are talking of planting trees. It is still, it's like telling a cow to eat and excrete.
How then are we going to achieve this low cost of living?
It is a process. The cost of living, and by the way, the president has found it very tough to lower the cost of living. Campaigning on top of roof cars and working in office, those are two different things. And he has actually acknowledged. The other day he just said, we said a lot of things during campaigns, but when he was apologizing to the KUTV boss, lowering the cost of living is actually a process. It is not an event. It's a long-term process that involves the nitty-gritties. When you want to lower the cost of living, you must go for the basics. The unga. He said the unga will be 70 shillings.
Still at 200 shillings,
Now it is 200 or what? Something of the sort.
Yes.
Much more than what is there. The fuel price. The moment the fuel is hiked, everything goes up because these processes relies on logistics and transportation.
Is that to say the subsidization of fertilizer is not going to work because we are looking at the element of cost prices of fuel?
People are angry and you are subsidizing fertilizer instead of subsidizing unga. Are we okay? Are we okay? Who is advising the president? Next week I will have to look for the prime CS to tell him and give him a note to take to the president so that he is advised well. You are going to subsidize fertilizer, which is going to take approximately 6 months to produce crops, and people are dying of hunger already. You are creating pay bills. So who is not who? Who is not fooling who? maybe I'm not understanding what it means to work from bottom up, but you cannot, the prioritization of government projects is actually what we call state capture. State capture is when you are subsidizing fertilizer and not subsidizing basic commodities which people consume on a daily basis. That is fuel, that is unga, that is sugar. You are basically avoiding this and going for fertilizer. Who consumes fertilizer directly? When an event that we are trying to address an urgent challenge, you are now taking fertilizer to Samburu. That is what the president is trying to say, because farming is not a preserve for a specific group of people in Kenya. Everyone can farm. Now people are dying in West Pokot because of hunger. You land there in a government vehicle full of fertilizer. Is that not state capture?
Well, you said it. I couldn't say more. Even as we near the juncture of this conversation, talk to us about the constitutional amendment dilemma that was put across by the Siaya Governor James Orengo yesterday.
When the current president was the former deputy president, during the BBI, which I never supported either, and I'm not apologizing to anyone for not doing that, it was within my constitutional confines that I opposed BBI. He said a president cannot initiate a constitutional amendment process. The president went ahead and said the process must be pro-people. Mm-hmm. He again emphasized that the process must come from the people. When the president writes to the two house speakers or the majority leaders to pass a bill to create an office of the opposition leader, what is he actually trying to say? You know, double speaking in this country actually, since independence, 59 years since we got independence, you can lie to some of the people some of the time, and some of the time some of the people, but not all the people all the time. We are actually bright souls. We know these things. We can comprehend. The president cannot initiate. The opposition should just reject it ab initio, because that is double speak. Actually, we've seen the president implementing BBI in a very different version. Mm-hmm. He created the office of the Prime CS, which is actually, to me, that is a ghost worker. It is not in the constitution. He also went ahead to put the opposition leaders in an attempt to twist the independent functionality of parliament. That is state capture. What is the rush with parliament? What is the rush with judiciary and the funds and everything, the appointments? In whose interest are all this being done? Is it in my interest as an ordinary citizen, or in the interest of the people we refer to as state capture enablers?
As we wrap up, are we truly independent? Because this is a very vast topic we cannot really finish in one day. Perhaps I should call you in tomorrow so that we can delve into it deeply.
We are not yet independent. When when injustices can be institutionalized and illegal and legal processes be twisted to favor a specific group of people, we are not yet independent. During the colonial era, people suffered police brutality, people suffered mass murder. We still get people being shot along the highways while driving because of unknown reasons and unknown motives. We are not yet independent. If people can still die in the hospitals while public money is siphoned in the name of procurement of drugs, which ends in individual private pharmacies, that is state capture. State capture and independence cannot fit in the same statement. It is a very great mistake. That is a grammatical mistake that we'll never comprehend in the sense or in the mind of a reasonable Kenyan.
Well, you've heard it.
We cannot speak of Jamhuri and independence while today Parliament cannot enact laws independently without the speaker or any other majority leader receiving calls from State House. That is not independence.
Well, thank you very much, Kennedy Sankara. You've heard it from the man himself. We are not independent. What are your thoughts? We take a break. We'll be back in a few.